he says, I want you to bear fruit. And then the fourth thing that he says there is this. He goes on, he says, bearing fruit, and so that you will grow in the knowledge of God. And he says this, and then I'm also praying that you would grow in your endurance. In other words, that you would endure to the end. He says, I am praying that you would have the great power, the power of the Holy Spirit living in you according to his great might. In other words, the Holy Spirit's powerful working in you. He says, then that will produce what? In patience and endurance. And so he says this, he says, you know what? I want you to be people that can get through the tough stuff. I don't want you to be people that are complaining. I don't want you to be people that are looking at your circumstances. Yes, you're going to have disease. Yes, you're going to have hard times in relationships. Yes, people are going to disappoint you. Yes, there are going to be hard times at work. But he goes, I want you to be people who have a stick-to-itiveness, who have an endurance, who can move on through those things. I ask you this, if I were to take a picture, if we were to have somebody take a picture of everybody in this room, the question would be this: who would be here in 5 years? And I don't mean just connected to Intersect Church. I mean in church at all. I mean like growing spiritually at all. I mean this, that it is so easy to have the trappings of the world and the things that are consuming your time and other things that God doesn't get to be number one. And so the question is this: are you planning on enduring? Are you planning on getting through all of that? Are you planning on sticking it out and being committed no matter what? And you know what? There are some of us, unfortunately, that our parents let us quit the Little League team. There's some of us who never learned the hard lessons of getting through things, no matter if you have a B or a C on a test or a D, you finish it. No matter if the job's tough, you get up every morning and you go, because that's what you have to do, and that's what responsible, committed, enduring people do. And I tell you what, I meet a lot of people who would say something like this: you know, Brian, I'm just coming back to God. I'm just kind of getting back into church. And then they tell me a story about how they've drifted. And they said something like, you know, I used to be involved in church, and I used to be in a group, and I used to serve at the church. I used to be really involved. And you know what? I got just 5 degrees off course. Then I got 10 degrees. Then I got 15 degrees. And then I woke up one day and I had just drifted away from God. I just kind of gone my own way. And then they tell me about the horrible consequences that have happened because they are not following God and they are not where they need to be with God. And they can articulate it sometimes, and sometimes they can't. But I turn to them and I say, let me ask you something. Are the consequences of drifting better or worse than the consequences of having to endure? Is it harder to let yourself drift and just go through the motions of life and let time with other things and other interests just kind of get you off course? Or is it harder to endure and stick with it and be committed even through the tough stuff? Because I want to tell you something. These aren't just difficulties outside. Some of these are inside the church. Some of these are difficulties from being a part of being with God's people. That a small group goes awry, or a ministry kind of flakes out, or people disappoint you, or there hurts, or confusion, or disappointments, or whatever it is. People will hurt you. There will be hard times. But the fact is God tells us, and Paul prays here, I want you to be patient through affliction. I want you to endure those things. And I want you to, at the end of your life, be able to look back and say, I was an endurer. And you know what, Paul, if you ask me what is one of the key things that Paul's always challenging people to do, I would say persevere. At the end of his life in 2 Timothy 4:7, he says this. He says, I fought the good fight. I finished the race. I kept the faith. And Paul says, you can look back at my life, and I've been through a lot of stuff. Shipwreck, imprisonment, beatings, people accusing me of things, incredible embarrassment and shame, and turning my back on everything that I knew once in life. And you know what? Paul knew this. At the end of his life, when his life is done and he crosses over into the other world, he knew this. he was going to be looking in the face of a finisher. Because Jesus Christ, it says this about him. It says, fixing your hope on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who, for the joy set before him, endured the cross, scorning its shame. And Paul knows we've got to persevere. We've got to endure. We've got to get through the hard stuff. And he says, I pray that you endure to the end.